At my sister's wedding, I was shocked to see a slideshow of family photos, every one with me cropped out. I asked quietly, was this a mistake? She smirked, you were never picture perfect anyway. Tears welled up, but an hour later, I took the mic and shared what Dad left for me in his last letter. The room fell silent, but from the very beginning, my relationship with my younger sister Brielle has been difficult. I was the one who watched over her when our mother passed. I was the one who took her to school when Dad couldn't leave work, who stayed up with her when she had a fever, who calmed her down when she failed a math test. I didn't resent it, not really. It was just what needed to be done. We were sisters, and that meant something. At least to me. But somewhere along the line, Brielle started acting like we were rivals. For attention. For affection. For approval. It wasn't sudden. It was like slowly watching ivy creep across a wall. It took years, but one day I realized it had completely covered everything. Even as adults, it never stopped. She got her degree in public relations, stayed in Charleston, and built a carefully curated life, charming husband-to-be, picture-perfect social media, a friend group of Southern belles and wealthy clients. I, on the other hand, moved to Asheville to work as a divorce counselor. I lived quietly. I worked hard. I didn't need applause. But when our dad passed last year, things shifted again. Brielle was always closer to our dad in a way that didn't require effort. She didn't spend the long nights in the hospital with him. She didn't manage the estate. But when it was time to plan the funeral, she swept in like the lead actress in a drama she hadn't been around to rehearse. And still, I let her have it. The flowers, the eulogy, the attention. Afterward, his lawyer handed me a letter. Sealed. Just for me. I didn't open it right away. Partly because I wasn't ready, partly because I feared what it might contain. I put it in my drawer and didn't touch it for 11 months. Then came Brielle's wedding. She didn't ask me to be in the bridal party. She said it was because the lineup was full, but everyone knew it was personal. I offered to help with planning, got brushed off. I even tried to organize a brunch the week before, and she told me she was too slammed. I arrived at the wedding with no expectations. Just tried to blend in, be supportive. I even wore a dress in the color scheme she'd chosen without being told. I smiled through introductions. Clapped at speeches. Sat quietly at a back table. Then the slideshow began. It was a series of family photos set to some overly sentimental instrumental song. Guests cooed and laughed. It was supposed to be a celebration of childhood, family, nostalgia. Only, I wasn't in it. Not once. There were shots of Brielle with our dad, Brielle with our mom, Brielle with cousins, aunts, family vacations, holidays. I knew these photos. I remembered being there. But in every single one, I had been edited out. I waited until the music ended and the lights came back up. I stood beside her near the cake table, lowered my voice, and asked, was this a mistake? She didn't even blink. You were never picture perfect anyway. And then she walked off like we were discussing table centerpieces. I couldn't breathe. I stepped outside, past the lantern-lit walkway, and sat on a stone bench behind a magnolia tree. The air was thick, warm, and silent except for distant laughter from the reception. I pulled my phone from my clutch, staring blankly at it. I wasn't going to cry. I'd told myself that already. But something in me cracked open, and the ache that had been building over the years, all the quiet exclusions, all the cold shoulders, the times I'd bitten my tongue flooded through. That's when I remembered the letter. I had brought it with me, almost instinctively, tucked in the lining of my purse. My hands trembled as I slid it out, gently unsealing the flap. The paper had yellowed slightly, and the ink looked like it had been written in low light, but Dad's handwriting was unmistakable. He started with love. With acknowledgement. He wrote, Delaney, I know you've carried more than anyone realizes. I saw it, even when I didn't say so. I let too much slide, especially with Brielle, because it felt easier at the time. That was my mistake. But I want to correct what I can. The lake house is yours. The deed has been changed. You earned that place 10 times over fixing it with me, painting, sanding, caring when no one else did. It's yours now. Entirely. Also, I set up a trust under your name. You don't have to do anything to earn it. You already did. Let this give you freedom. I told Brielle and the others it was spent on treatments. Let them think that. You don't owe anyone explanations. I love you more than I ever said out loud. I hope you know that now. Dad, I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The anger started to fade, replaced by something else. Something steady. I walked back into the reception. I didn't make a scene. I sat back at my table and waited. An hour later, after the cake cutting and the speeches, the DJ handed the mic to the best man, who stumbled through a drunken toast about college days and late nights and finally mercifully wrapped it up. The room was buzzing, mid-laughter, as I stood up. I didn't ask for the mic. I just walked up and took it. I saw Brielle's expression shift from amusement to confusion to discomfort. I wasn't going to speak tonight, I said softly, but something happened earlier that made me realize it's time to stop keeping things quiet. The room shifted. The air seemed to thicken. Guests turned toward me, fanning themselves slightly. I noticed something during the slideshow. I'm not in any of the family photos. Not one. And I was there. I remember every holiday, every trip, every birthday. But someone decided I didn't belong in the memories. Murmurs spread across the room. Brielle's jaw clenched. I continued. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. A technical error. But when I asked, I was told. I was never picture perfect anyway. The words hung in the air like smoke. I let it sting. I stepped outside. And then I remembered a letter my father left me. One I hadn't read until today. I want to share part of it with you. I pulled the folded pages from my purse and, with a voice steadier than I expected, read the sections about the lake house, about the trust, about how he'd seen everything and chose to make things right. When I finished, the room was dead silent. And I mean dead silent. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. I looked up and scanned the room, then glanced at Brielle. She looked stricken. Not because of the inheritance. Not even the house. But because she hadn't known. Because she realized she hadn't been in control of the narrative the whole time. I handed the mic back. Walked off stage. Picked up my purse. And I didn't look back. After I stepped down from the mic, I didn't storm out like I wanted to. I sat back down. I wanted Brielle to feel the weight of it with me still in the room. People were staring. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few looked straight up impressed. No one spoke to me for a few minutes. I think they were trying to figure out if they'd just witnessed a quiet mental breakdown or the cleanest mic drop in family history. Eventually, my dad's cousin Glenn made his way over. He sat across from me with a slow, deliberate breath. She really cropped you out? He asked, like he wasn't sure he'd understood it correctly. I nodded. He chuckled once under his breath. Your dad wouldn't have liked that. Not one bit. That was all he said before giving my hand a light squeeze and returning to his table. I appreciated that more than I can explain. Sometimes silence holds more truth than speeches. Meanwhile, Brielle was scrambling. I watched her flit around the room, talking to guests, eyes darting over to me like she was trying to gauge how much damage had been done. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper, an unraveling of control. Her husband Camden stood awkwardly near the bar, clearly not sure whether to join in the damage control or let her burn it out. Smart guy. Eventually, she approached. I saw her coming from the corner of my eye and braced myself. She bent slightly to speak, so her voice didn't carry. You really couldn't just let me have one day? She hissed, teeth clenched in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I met her gaze calmly. You already had every other one. She straightened, the mask slipping for just a second. You didn't have to read that letter. I raised my eyebrows. You didn't have to erase me from our family. Her nostrils flared, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. Panic. The kind you feel when a lie is about to blow up and take everything with it. I didn't stay much longer after that. I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. The kind of tired that goes bone deep and takes months to heal. As I left, a few people came up to me. Quiet, small moments. A tap on the shoulder here. A soft, "That was brave," there. I didn't need the validation, but it helped. What surprised me most was when Camille, our childhood neighbor and someone who always adored Brielle, caught me at the valet. She looked conflicted, like her mouth was full of unsaid things. Then finally, "Your dad would have been proud." That one undid me a little. I thanked her, got in the car, and drove. I didn't go straight home. I went to the lake house. It was about an hour and a half outside of Charleston, near Lake Marion. I hadn't been there since Dad passed, but it had stayed locked up tight. I parked, stepped out into the warm night, and unlocked the door. The scent hit me first. Cedar. Dust. Salted air. And underneath it all, the faintest trace of my dad's aftershave, like the walls had soaked it in over the years. Everything was just as we left it. The mismatched rugs, the crack in the kitchen tile, the bookshelf with its leaning tower of paperbacks. I dropped my heels by the door and walked barefoot to the back porch. The lake stretched out before me, dark and calm, the moon dancing across the surface like it was trying to whisper something. I sat in the old wicker chair Dad used to drink his coffee in every morning, pulled the letter out again, and read it under the porch light. I read it slowly this time. Let every word settle. Not because I needed to believe it was real, but because I needed to believe he saw me. That all those years of being the quiet one, the background one, the reliable one, it hadn't gone unnoticed. He'd seen it. And in his own quiet way, he'd made sure I wouldn't be erased. Not from his story. Not from my own. The next day, I started cleaning. Not out of sadness or spite, but because it was time. The lake house had always been our place. Me and Dad. It had good bones, it just needed some care again. I hired a contractor to fix the porch railing, brought in a local woman to help clean out the attic, and started driving down every weekend. It became therapy in motion. Dusting old memories. Scrubbing out grief. Making space. Some weekends, I stayed overnight and sat by the fire pit, listening to cicadas, letting the silence tell me what years of noise never could. And then I got an idea. Not revenge. Not even redemption. Just renewal. There were women like me once who'd been sidelined, overshadowed, overlooked. Women healing from family fractures, divorces, losses. What if this place could be more than just mine? What if it could hold space for them, too? So I started writing. Reaching out. Slowly building something. A few months later, the lake house had a name. Stillness Cove. It wasn't a business. Not really. It was a retreat. A quiet place for people who'd forgotten what their own voice sounded like. I never advertised. It was all word of mouth. Former clients. Friends of friends. Women who'd heard about the counselor by the lake and just needed a place to land. Meanwhile, I didn't hear from Brielle. Not for a long while. But I did hear about her. Through relatives. Through acquaintances. Through a couple of mutual friends who called me out of the blue just to check in. Apparently, the wedding wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. Something shifted that night. Some people saw through her for the first time. Some pulled away. And I think for the first time in her life she wasn't the star of every story. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone what to think. I just kept going. Because for the first time in a very long time I wasn't living in her shadow. And I wasn't trying to fit into anyone's picture but my own. It had been about 8 months since the wedding. Stillness Cove was quiet that morning. The lake was glass smooth, the trees reflected in perfect symmetry, and there was a chill in the air that hinted fall was coming early that year. I had 2 women staying the weekend, both going through long divorces, both sitting quietly on the porch with me, sipping tea. We didn't talk much. That was the point. Sometimes, healing didn't need words. After they left that afternoon, I found an envelope tucked inside the screen door. My name written in handwriting I'd know anywhere. Brielle. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen table. Stared at it while I made soup. Walked past it 3 times before I finally sat down with a spoonful of lentils still steaming and tore the flap open. It wasn't long. Delaney, I'd been thinking about what you said that night. About how I had every other day. You were right. I don't know why I needed so much from everyone. Maybe it's because I was afraid if I didn't take up space, I'd disappear. Maybe I resented how easy you made it all look, being good, being loved without asking for it. I was cruel. At the wedding, and before that too. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Brielle, it would have been easier if she hadn't written it. If she'd just stayed in her world and left me in mine. But people are messy, and life doesn't always give you clean edges. I didn't respond. Not that day. Not the day after. But I carried the letter with me for a week. And then, one afternoon while cleaning out the garden shed behind the lake house, I found something else, something I hadn't even realized I'd kept. It was a photo. An old one. Me, Dad, and Brielle. From a camping trip when I was maybe 13. She was 10. We were all squinting in the sun, holding s'mores, faces flushed and laughing. No one was cropped out. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. It was proof, I guess. That once, we had been okay. That night, I finally wrote back. I didn't say much. Brielle, I don't know if things can go back to what they were. But I heard you. Thank you for saying what you did. Take care. Delaney, I didn't offer a meeting. I didn't suggest a phone call. I didn't invite her here. Some wounds need to close on their own. But something inside me eased. The sharpness dulled. The tightness loosened. I kept building the life I'd started. One weekend retreat at a time. One sunrise at a time. A year later, I framed the photo from that camping trip. Hung it in the hallway of the lake house. Not because I missed what was, but because I had made peace with what had been. People sometimes ask me if I'm close with my family. I smile and say, I'm closer to myself now than I ever was before. And that, to me, is everything. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. The truth is, real healing rarely feels cinematic. It's not one speech, one confrontation, one dramatic mic drop that fixes it all. Healing is in the days after, when no one's clapping, and you're still showing up for yourself anyway. Brielle and I didn't become close again. I didn't expect us to. But we found a rhythm, eventually. A few polite texts. An update around the holidays. No more false warmth. No more forced affection. Just something resembling respect. The absence of bitterness felt like its own kind of reunion. She never asked to visit the lake house. I think she knew better than to treat it like a second chance at something she hadn't earned. But I heard through mutual family that she'd been doing some work of her own, therapy, mostly. Letting go of things. Owning her role in the cracks between us. I respected that. Quiet work is the hardest kind. Stillness Cove continued to grow in small, meaningful ways. Every few months, someone new would arrive, suitcase in hand, heartbreak in their eyes. Women mostly, but sometimes men too. People at crossroads, people unraveling, people coming back to themselves after years of forgetting who they were. I didn't offer magic. I just offered space. A warm place to stay. Food that felt like comfort. silence that didn't ask for anything. And, eventually, gentle conversations when they were ready. Sometimes they asked me what brought me here. I never shared the slideshow story. That wasn't the point. I'd just say, it took me a long time to realize I didn't have to stay cropped out of my own life. That always landed with them. It had been nearly 2 years since the wedding when I got a letter from my father's lawyer. Apparently, he had arranged for one final surprise, a bench placed at the end of the lake house dock, engraved simply, "For Delaney, who never stopped showing up." I cried when I saw it. Not because I needed the words, but because he chose them. Because even after he was gone, he was still speaking in the ways that mattered. I visit that bench most mornings. Coffee in hand, birds rustling in the trees, the water gently lapping against the posts. Sometimes I think about what my life would have looked like if Brielle had never crossed that line. If the wedding had gone off without that cruelty. If I'd never read the letter. But I don't linger in those what-ifs. Because while her cruelty cracked something open, what came through wasn't just pain, it was clarity. I was never the dramatic one. Never the loud one. But I had a quiet kind of power. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that builds a life from ashes without bragging about the fire. Revenge? It wasn't a speech. It wasn't an inheritance. It wasn't about making her feel small. It was building something bigger than both of us. Something that couldn't be cropped, deleted, or rewritten. It was the moment I stopped waiting to be included and chose myself instead. And on that dock, with the morning sun on my face, I don't feel erased anymore. I feel whole.